Welcome to Family Matters. I'm Andrew Beckwith, president of the Massachusetts Family Policy Council, and this is my New Hampshire counterpart, Sharon McGinley.
Yes, I'm the executive director of Cornerstone Action in New Hampshire.
So our mission is part of a 40-state network allied with Focus on the Family, Alliance Defending Freedom, and Family Research Council, and we tackle issues relating to family values, such as the sanctity of life from conception to natural death, the dignity of natural marriage, so God's design, one man, one woman in a covenant relationship for life, and really all of God's plan for human sexuality, which is so much in the news these days, and also parental rights and our constitutional right to religious liberty. So today we're going to discuss a topic that is particularly sensitive to me because I have children that are in middle school and high school. And one of the calls that I frequently get, and I know you get them too, Shannon, in New Hampshire, is from parents who are concerned with what their children are being taught about sex education in the public schools. And in Massachusetts, there's been legislation pending at the State House for several years now, probably more than a decade actually, that would mandate certain types of sex education in all of our public schools. Mm-hmm. And so that's something we've fought against because we believe that ultimately parents should be the ones who decide what is taught and when and how to their children, and that if it is going to be taught in the public schools, it should be done in a way that is consistent with the sort of ideals and the comfort level of that particular community, not something forced from the top down by state bureaucrats. But we took it a step further and we decided to look at what the state would be imposing if this legislation were passed, and so we ordered some of the curricula that they've already approved, kind of getting it teed up for if this legislation passes, and it's pretty outrageous stuff. As you can imagine, Planned Parenthood, the Planned Parenthood League of Massachusetts specifically, is one of the entities that is writing some of this curricula. So that is a red flag, obviously, to us as parents and believers and pro-lifers right out of the gate, that our children will be educated by an entity which is dedicated to the destruction of unborn human life. But even beyond just the abortion issue, the type of things they're trying to teach our kids are really outrageous. For example, in their Get Real curriculum for middle schoolers. So this is one of the curriculums we ordered. It's for grades 6, 7, and 8, particularly the grade 7. There's a chart on here which talks about dental dams. And
I have a 7th grader, so this is really hitting home right now, but go ahead.
I've got an 8th grader and a 9th grader, and when I first reviewed this curriculum, my eldest was in 7th grade. So trying to figure out, okay, where is he sort of mentally, emotionally, and this is what they want to teach him. So they want to teach 7th graders about dental dams for use in oral to anal sexual stimulation. And I apologize to the audience for even sort of using this terminology, but we talked about this before the show. We just believe that it's important that everyone knows what is being taught to our children. If we're uncomfortable as adults discussing this, then how much less appropriate is it for our children? And they take it a step further. So you can use a dental dam for, again, oral to anal sexual stimulation, or if you don't have one lying around, you can use non-microwavable saran wrap. So that's just sort of one little slice of what is being taught in this curricula, type of radical, non-reproductive sex acts that they are by default normalizing and encouraging. And here's another irony: the legislation that would force sex ed curricula like this in our public schools says that it's only requiring curricula that is age appropriate and medically accurate. The problem is, who defines what is age appropriate and what is medically accurate? And when you read the legislation, it effectively punts that decision to the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So you've got state bureaucrats deciding what is age appropriate and medically accurate. And again, when we reviewed the actual curricula, they're telling us they think it's age appropriate for 12 and 13-year-olds to learn about dental dams for oral to anal sexual stimulation, and that it's medically accurate to use saran wrap as a prophylactic. So that's where we are right now with this.
Oh, that is so frustrating. It's horrifying to me to think that this stuff is being pushed down the throat of these kids, and yet the parents don't even know that it's happening. Right. So many parents, they're both working. They're not micromanaging everything that's going on in the schools. They're trusting that the schools are making the right decisions for their kids. And so I believe it is critical to get this message out that parents ask questions of the schools and what is being taught and so forth. I mean, I've had to do the same thing in going into meetings of the health teacher, who coordinates all of this when they're bringing in an outside speaker and asking, coming in with a list of questions about what is the philosophy, what is being talked about, and are the parents allowed to sit in on the conversation if they stay quiet and sit in the back of the room. Like, exert your rights and ask these questions, and then you make that decision about whether or not you feel comfortable allowing your child to participate in that, and that they cannot be punished for not being present in that presentation that's being given.
So
what
a lot of parents, I think, don't know is that in Massachusetts, and I want you to tell me if it's the same for New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, the current law says you have the right to opt your child out from sexual health.
Same in New Hampshire.
Okay, good. And you also have the right to review the curriculum they're using. The school is required by law to make it reasonably available to the parent. Now, they may say, okay, you have to come in on a Tuesday afternoon and sit in this little office space and go through it for 30 minutes, but they still have to make it available so you can review it and you can decide to opt your children out. And like you said, they cannot punish the child academically or otherwise if you do choose to opt them out.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that they definitely have to notify them, I believe, 2 weeks ahead of time that the class is happening. They also have to, we passed a law last year that Cornerstone was very actively involved in that requires the parents to give permission to opt in for any non-academic surveys. Because one of the challenges that we were having in New Hampshire is that there were questionnaires being given to the students that were asking fifth and sixth graders, for example, about their homosexual activity, sexual activity, or,
how many sexual partners do you have?
Yes, how many times have you had oral sex in the last year? These kinds of questions that totally inappropriate. And so before it was an opt-in, an opt-out policy, and now you have to actually get the parents' permission to do so, which is huge.
That's a step in the right direction. We've been fighting for similar legislation in Massachusetts for sex ed in general. For example, if you have to have a permission slip to go to the library out in town as a field trip, or to a museum, or to take Tylenol at the nurse's office, for something as serious and intimate and personal as sexual health education, we believe in order to maximize parental involvement and oversight, that the school should require an opt-in permission slip to take that class, not put the burden on the parents to remember when the class is and to opt my child out.
Right.
So we've been trying for years to make that distinction. We haven't succeeded yet.
Yeah. One of the things I've really struggled with too, I know that at the end of a number of these kind of presentations, they have a Q&A time, and the students are allowed to put their questions in a box, and then the teacher will pull them out with their guest speaker, for example, and then they'll go through and they'll answer these questions. And you can just let your mind wander about the kinds of questions that are being asked.
And the guest speakers.
And the guest speakers, what they're saying, exactly. And many of them oftentimes are from Planned Parenthood, actually. And not always the case, but oftentimes. No, never been invited to speak. And it's always a challenge to try to get someone of an alternative viewpoint to come in there. But what I was going to say is I wish that the parents could actually see a little bit more detail about, it's not enough, in other words, to just see the curriculum, because you can't control the conversation that may come from these kinds of presentations and what is said during the Q&A, because what is appropriate for one child may not necessarily be appropriate for another child who is identically the same age because of circumstances in their family and what they've been exposed to. Perhaps one has already, been going through puberty for quite some time, where another one perhaps hasn't even started. And so, it's very helpful for parents to know the kinds of questions that even came up retroactively, to be able to then have those private conversations with your child in order to put your own values on that and what you want to instill. There can be real opportunities for parents bonding over this, this kind of a thing, and an opportunity to instill your values in it. I'm not saying expose them to pornography, but at the same time, I really hope that parents, that's what the school is doing. Yeah, but I think there's a real opportunity for parents to educate, and the doors have been open. Like, don't waste the opportunity to talk to your child about some of these things and to place your values, in your child. And I treasure some of those conversations that I've had with my kids. And even if it's a case of me pulling them out or allowing them to participate, a part of me feels like, within reason, of course, that game on, like, I want to be able to have these conversations with them, because they're going to get it through social media and everything else. And that is horrifying to me, that the world is putting their spin on it.
And they are. The world definitely is. And that's one of the things that my wife and I have, a conclusion we've come to, that, as parents, because of the world we're living in, the culture and society that exists right now, we don't have the luxury of sort of avoiding or putting off these conversations for as long as we'd like to. If we're silent, if the church is silent, then the only voice that our children are going to hear is essentially the voice of Planned Parenthood and the mainstream media, which is pushing sexual activity down to a lower and lower age level, and is normalizing all kinds of sexual behaviors, even stuff that I didn't even know was a thing. I mean, for example, going back to the initial thing we discussed about the dental dams, oral to anal sexual stimulation. I mean, I was a prosecutor in the Marine Corps and prosecuted my share of sexual assault crimes and pornography on government computers and things like that. And that particular sex act never came up, and now we're going to teach 12-year-olds about it. So unfortunately, as parents, we have to speak into our child's lives on that issue at a much younger age.
That's true.
You
can't even go to the dentist office. I mean, the whole reason why I had to talk about transgenderism and surrogacy was because we were at the dentist office, and my, at the time, 4th grader sees, on the cover of People magazine, what looks to be a man having a baby, right on the cover. I was not prepared for that conversation with my little guy at that time, and here I am, found myself having that conversation.
National Geographic, about a year or so ago, had a very prominent cover story with a young, I think, boy who identifies as female, and that was the headline story. And I had to explain that to my children as well. But I mean, speaking of sort of straight up pornography, going back to Planned Parenthood, we ordered their curricula from Get Real. It's
I don't even want to think about it.
But it's expensive, but we wanted to buy it to see what's actually in it, so we could call out these legislators that are trying to force them on everybody. But if you go to Planned Parenthood's website or the YouTube page, there are some videos that are for use in educating teens about consent, and they get pretty erotic pretty quickly, and they feature same-sex couples very prominently. So again, it's not only about talking about consent, which is an important issue, maybe not something we need to push down to 11 and 12-year-olds, because you don't want to encourage them to be participating in that behavior, but then to normalize same-sex activity. Again, now we're getting into moral and ideological issues, not just sort of the birds and the bees. Now we're talking the birds and the birds, and that's very different. And you mentioned there's some videos as well, I think, that take it to the next level.
Yeah, in Planned Parenthood of Northern New England, which covers Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, a few years ago had put out a video. There's a gal that does all these videos for the teens over different topics.
BDSM stands for bondage and discipline, domination and submission, sadism and masochism.
But what she was talking about in this video was like playing out for these teenagers. Again, this messaging was specifically targeted to teenagers.
That's the disturbing thing.
Exactly. Spelling it out about sadomasochistic behavior to them, and like, when does no mean no, and describing like a safe word that definitely means stop, and all of this. And like, you're really like revving up their engine and then expecting to just turn it off, at the time. I mean, you're literally, for a group of people who are so focused on sexual assault, which is horrific, they are putting these young people, both males and females, into a position that they will experience sexual assault. You are putting them right to the edge of the cliff and expecting them to be able to just turn it off. It's completely unrealistic, and frankly, I believe morally irresponsible.
It is. I mean, it feeds into the sexual aggressors. Typically, it's males who want to do more, take things further, and by normalizing it both for them and for the young women in an educational context, it says that, look, as a woman, it is okay for a guy or a boyfriend or whatever to expect you to do these things.
Right.
Because this is normal. This is okay.
Right.
And I've got
fueled by 50 Shades of Grey, no less.
Of course.
That teenagers are watching.
Yeah, unbelievable. But tragically, it puts this burden, I think, on young women to do more. Because it's expected of them.
Exactly. It's very degrading. I'm frustrated, like, where are the feminists in all of this? Because it is so degrading to the dignity of women to be treated like this, in this way, that it's somehow attractive to abuse them and so forth, and to make them have to go into role play instead of being themselves, for a culture that so pushes about being who you are and being true to yourself. Like, it's actually giving the complete opposite message of it too. And I think that it can actually flip on its head as the mother of 5 sons, like just seeing how females then become the aggressor. I have some college sons, and that, seeing the flipping around where the girls feel like that's expected of them, and that the guys really want that. And then in some cases the guys are like, whoa there, cowboy, cowgirl, so to speak, that this is too much. So it's really just turning like human sexuality completely on its head. And I would like to interject too, this is creating a business for Planned Parenthood. Yes. This is creating a cyclic form of income for them, because they know that if we treat God's design for our sexuality the way that he intended for it to be treated, there's no money to be made off of it.
Yeah.
And so they know that they're going to come to them for all these drugs and devices and toys and all of these kinds of things, and then they're going to end up with sexually transmitted diseases. They're going to end up with pregnancy, and they're going to be there to offer them abortion when the birth control fails and all that. And what I really want to say to them is, there's no condom for the human heart to protect them from all the emotional pain that they're going to deal with. And it's the parents then that are left to pick up the pieces of all the garbage that they're putting into these kids.
This idea of safe sex is a lie. Again, outside of God's design for marriage, one man, one woman, any type of sexual activity outside of that is by definition not safe. It's not safe spiritually, and it's typically not safe emotionally, and oftentimes not safe physically. Now, some of these curricula will pay lip service to abstinence or waiting, but then one of the curricula we reviewed identifies one type of abstinence as having outer course.
Yeah, everything but.
Right, actual.
Yeah. That can make a baby.
The reproductive act.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, really what it boils down to is that their biggest concern is making a baby. It's not about anything else. And I'm convinced that they don't really even care about STDs, i.e. the example that you gave about the saran wrap. I mean, come on.
How is
really,
that medically accurate?
Yeah, how is this medically accurate? If you've got someone who's HIV positive, you're going to rely upon a piece of saran wrap that's non-microwavable, to protect you from suffering from HIV, or perhaps another form of sexually transmitted disease that could have lifetime implications for both your health as well as your fertility.
And the Planned Parenthood curricula, the Get Real curricula, comes with a demonstration kit, which we may have a shot for you here. I haven't decided yet whether that's even going to be permissible on this show. But again, it's what they wanted to show to 12 and 13-year-old kids.
I think it's important to show it. I really do. I think it's important to show it because parents really need to know what is being told to their kids so that they can in turn counter it, and they can inject their values into the conversation.
Yeah. So, again, this is an important issue. A lot of times parents don't know what their kids are being taught. They don't know that they have a right to opt out, which is important. And even the legislators who are pushing this bill because Planned Parenthood tells them to, or they think that somehow this is the right move, they'll say, look, it's about making sure that kids get taught things that are age appropriate and medically accurate. And what I want people to know, what I want you to tell your legislator is that right now in Massachusetts, you and your neighbors and the parents of your children's classmates and the educators at your local community can decide what's best for your school. And this is actually going on in Worcester, Massachusetts right now, where the superintendent wants to use one curricula, but you've got people on the other side who want to promote another curricula that's on that list of state-approved curricula. I think it's called Making Proud Choices. It involves role playing for young kids, middle school kids. Some pretty offensive stuff. If this bill is passed, that we've been talking about, that would force certain types of sex ed curricula, that local school committee in Worcester wouldn't be able to decide what's best for them. They would be stuck with what the state bureaucrats want to push down from Beacon Hill. So it's important to know what our rights are and what's going on in this area.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back with more, including there's a Planned Parenthood chat bot for teens, which we may experiment with to educate you on that in the near future. Stand by. Again, this is Family Matters. I'm Andrew Beckwith.
Sharon McGinley.
If you enjoyed today's show, please hit subscribe, turn on your notifications for these episodes and others that are on WhatTV. I encourage you to check out all the other great content. Until next time, continue to stand for family values. We've got your back.